Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be joined by Sam Jaeger, who you can currently see on your screens in The Handmaid's Tale, as well as The Devil in Ohio. And starting with The Handmaid's Tale, I wanted to talk a little bit about when you first came into this role, because it's become a much more expanded and centralized role within the show over the last few seasons.
Mhm.
But when you first came in, it was for a one-off episode, and it sounds like you'd been a fan of the series for a while. And I'm always interested in what were the really useful details for you to look at in terms of the script that you had in front of you and figuring out this character, but also just that essence of already having an idea of what the tone of the show was, how it was approaching storytelling, being able to see that the way that the other actors were embodying their characters, that really helped you in formulating him at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I became more a fan after I was cast in the show, but I had seen the pilot, and then I kind of chose, once I got the call for the audition, to not see too much of what happened in Gilead, because I felt like that would have, I don't know. I just felt like it would inform too much of, I didn't want to have any sort of I wanted to keep that outside perspective on all those things. But the caliber of the show and the specificity of the show and just how they hit the ground running was so immediately apparent from the pilot on. And, you're, especially in an era where people say, boy, once you get it 3 or 4 seasons into that series, it gets really good. And I'm like, can't it be good from like the jump? And Handmaids was great from the jump, and so to be a part of that has been one of the thrills of my life.
Yeah. And because you're talking there as well about some of the things that you intentionally wanted to keep a little bit of distance from in terms of
Mhm.
your character's knowledge, but also for yourself, I was interested in the way that you did that with the character of Serena, because there's very much, an admiration and an affection for the idea of who she was
Mm.
before Gilead from your character that we've seen really grow and blossom throughout the show for him. And it sounds like that was an intention as well, of not learning too much about her character, really only seeing what he would see so that he could retain that lens. And so how does distancing yourself from the scripts or certain scenes or certain things that you're watching in the episodes really help in formulating that feel of an outsider, but also in building that admiration, because he can then tell himself whatever story he wants?
Right, right. There was an episode where they flashed back to who Serena was before Gilead, and that was the one episode I kind of focused on and preparing the character, because it felt like, and I think it's paid off in the years since, that Mark is enamored with not who Serena became in Gilead, but who she was before that. She was like a firebrand and a feminist and very highly intelligent, and I think he got attached to who that was, and then it took him a while to realize that woman is, has faded into the distance, and this woman who is, in the early seasons, seeking more and more power and trying to hold on to it. But I think he tries to see the good in people, and I try to do the same, and trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think one of the things that I like about Mark is, I think he kind of has that old adage in his mind at all times, which is, everyone is carrying a heavy burden, so be kind. And I think he sees all these people struggling in this really ruthless time, and they're all making, I guess, mistakes along the way. So,
And
um,
with what you're saying there as well, in terms of that dynamic with Serena, and how over time he really saw the version that she had become in Gilead more clearly.
mhm.
This last season, in essence, almost gets to strip some of that away again, though, and go back to the space somewhere in the middle between where she's been and where she had started from, because her relationship with Gilead has completely changed, and that power that she had has been stripped away. She herself has gone through becoming a mother, and that's changed her priorities a lot. And so how did that open up a lot of the space that you and Yvonne wanted to be able to play together, in terms of that emotional plane that always exists between them very quietly and very subtly?
Yeah, we were very curious once we read that. I think it was episode 4 or 5, where they kind of have their moment where they both acknowledge their relationship. We were skeptical. We didn't want to go too far with it, and so we were kind of dancing around it even in that scene. But I think the testament to the writing on the show is that we built these characters, and through the subtext, through what's not being said, and what's only minor, occasionally glimpsed in the scripts, that you can see that there's a tension and an attraction, but they tamp it down, because to admit would be too dangerous.
And within that as well, it also means that the way that your character moves around her, but even just in the world, is always very specific and very nuanced. When he's having the conversation with her this season about trying to convince her that she should stay in a safer, protective space rather than making the choice that she wants to for herself, there's a moment where he touches her arm, and even just something as small as touching her arm feels like a huge action within the realm of their characters and the world of the show. And so do you find that you have to make very specific and much more nuanced choices in terms of body language and mannerisms and physical elements with a character?
Yeah, I think he's very calculated, and so is she, and they're very formal in their relationship. So I like to say that though the show is present day, their relationship is very much like an Elizabethan romance, that it feels like Pride and Prejudice or something, or or Sense and Sensibility, where you're just kind of, these two people are reserved, and something like you said, like just him holding her, just holding onto her elbow, and as she turns, is a large step for him, and so I think we just kind of built that throughout the course of the series. And then, one thing you're always trying to do is stay true to what you built, and you never want to, let it fall apart. And I think they built a good tension between these two for a long period of time, but it was nice to see it, I think, pay off a little bit this season.
And when you first took on the role, did you find that sense of stoicness in him quite early on? Because it's something where in the position that he's in, and the way that we get to know him in the show, is always within his job and his profession. And so there's a real necessity for him to keep a lot underneath the surface. So there's a lot of things with him in a character that he would probably love to say out loud, but knows that he can't say and knows that he can't express. And so particularly at the beginning, where he didn't know the other characters as well, we didn't see as many of those elements on the surface as we do at the moment.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I mean, he has to keep all of his cards close to his chest. I think he realizes that he's in a precarious position, trying to hold on to what's left of democracy, and navigating all these people with very visceral emotions, and also lots of trauma is an important task, but he deals with refugees, I think, a lot. Mark does. And so he understands where they're coming from and is willing to hold space for them.
I love that phrasing that you just said in terms of holding space, because there's a lot of scenes where that is ultimately what your performance is giving to the other characters, in them needing to be allowed an emotional outlet, them being able to express anger or frustration or hurt or pain, and him having to kind of very much be the person that just listens to them and holds that space for them emotionally. What are some of the challenges that come with filming scenes like that, though? Because it's less about a kind of back and forth exchange in the same realm, but very much giving a different energy over to what they're giving you in a scene?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. One of my great influences in my life and also my career is my wife. She's an amazing actress, but she's also an impeccable listener, and she listens to the our children, and she gets my friends to open up in ways that are just so unique. And she just I remember one time we had our friend Jeff over, and Jeff was my childhood buddy, and it was halftime of a football game, and Amber and Jeff were out back, and I was listening to the window, and and I could hear Jeff talking to Amber in a way that he didn't talk to me. And I thought, how is my wife able to do this? How can she get people to open up in a way that I can't? I mean, here it is, my one of my childhood friends, and my wife is able to get him to tell her more than he's ever told me. And at that very moment, as I'm thinking this, I hear through the window my wife say, "How do you feel about that, Jeff?" And there was a long pause. And then I heard Jeff say, "Well," and then he proceeded to tell her exactly how he felt. And I thought, oh, that's it. That's what she does. She holds space. And when the time is right, she allows, somebody to explain or to feel how they feel. And I think at some point in the series, I took that into the work I do with Mark, which is, holding space for people that are, who've clearly lived through a lot more than Mark has. And so, he's always navigating, but I think he realizes that he can glean a lot more and gain a lot more from listening than from trying to push people in a direction they don't want to go.
I love that. And I mean, also equally, the dynamic that he has with June and that you and Elizabeth Moss play often in each other does allow different sides. There's times where he allows for that space and he does create that, but also there's times where she's antagonistic towards him because she's frustrated that he can't give her everything that she needs, and he will push back on her, and they will enter conflict in moments in discussion and discourse with one another. And so what's the way in that's really opened up this character and the way that you can play to him and scenes differently, in the fact that, kind of going back to that idea of at the beginning, it had to be, very by the book, very protocol driven as a character. And now he can sit in June's living room and push back just as hard as she's pushing him sometimes, if the moment calls for it.
Yeah. The joys of this last season is watching that relationship kind of bloom, where they have a different dynamic than anybody else in the series. I think the only equivalent, we saw might be Kelly Whitford's character and Aunt Lydia. Commander Lawrence and Aunt Lydia have a little diplomacy as well. But there's not we see an affection that these two, and an admiration that they've built over this season, and I think that's come from Mark. I think June starts to see that Mark, yes, he is calculated, but his aim is true. He's an earnest guy trying to do the best he can, but he's got a lot of spinning plates. And but I think there is an admiration, and it's fun to watch this year how their relationship has flourished.
Yeah. And with the Devil in Ohio as well, it's interesting because that's also a character that, again, is very much creating space at times for his wife, and he really understands the trauma that she's gone through in her childhood. Even if it's something that the children aren't aware of, he's not afraid to kind of tell them, there's reasons for what's happening in our family and the way things are happening right now, and bringing someone else into that dynamic. But at the same time, he's very much an active participant in the fact that he has things that he needs in that dynamic as well. And so what was the difference in creating a dynamic like that with Emily, where there's moments where he's creating space for her, but also he's very much someone who has a lot of wants and needs and is able to create that for himself as well when he needs it?
Yeah, I think that I think their relationship has been uh is different in the fact that they've been together since they were in high school, and that relationship there's an understanding, a just a long we had to jump into those characters and feel, allow the audience to feel like, oh, these two, I buy this. You see them on screen and you buy it. These people have been together since they were babies, since they were teenagers, and I have siblings who've been together with their spouses since high school, and there's a common ground there that, um, it's not like they don't work at it. They have to every relationship needs to be worked on. Um, you know, upkeep. And so I think in Devil in Ohio, we're kind of seeing these two kind of at a crossroads where they definitely have a different opinions about how the family which direction the family needs to go. And I think that Peter, the character in Devil in Ohio, um, trusts that his wife is going to, even though he doesn't agree with the decision of bringing this girl into the family, he trusts that, well, she hasn't steered clear, or she hasn't steered us wrong in the past, or you know she makes sound decisions. And so I think one of the challenges of that storyline is watching how things go from just slightly off to bad to worse, and how he just never he puts his foot down, but it's almost too late at that point.
And there's also a moment where he kind of admits to his kids, like, I don't really know what's going to happen, and kind of
Mm,
shows his vulnerability and his own fragility in front of them. But at the same time, he's still their parent and he's still the authority figure, and he still has to kind of hold everything together for them. And so, how did you find that balance of the fragility and vulnerability, which he does actually allow them into that side of himself, but also at the same
mm.
time needing to be the person that's maintaining a sense of stability and maintaining a sense of everything's going to be okay for them?
That's cool, Mara. You're picking up on a lot of great scenes in these series. Yeah, that's one of the scenes um, that Daria wrote so beautifully, that you don't really have to work hard at trying to figure out what's there. The hardest part about being a parent is, you end up having to be not the parent you thought you'd be, but you have to be the parent that's right for the kid. And in that moment, it's a beautiful scene between uh a father and his daughter, where he just has to say, this is the truth, and I don't have the answers, and I don't know what those are. And I think as a parent, it's uh, when I started parenting, I thought I better have all the answers for my kids. And now I'm realizing it's much more. I think it's better for them to see, oh, this is a human, and here he is, way older than me, and still struggling with making the right decision. And and uh and so that's kind of what I try to take into my work with these stories. I've played dads for quite a while in my career, and I just try to um, take some of that into, what I've learned from being a father, into my work. And yeah, I love that scene, because it's really just a moment. He says, you know you, I'm just going to stop parenting and tell you that I'm as lost and as troubled as you are, but that's how it is. And I think it's a moment that allows, you allow it to grow up instead of telling them how to feel.
And was there a difference in how you were able to approach your work on a show like that? Because obviously the arc for your character is kind of fully mapped out for something like
Mm,
Devil in Ohio, but for things like Handmaid's Tale and Parenthood, and you've done a lot of extensive episodic work where you're really kind of getting a lot of the pieces as they come together, and having to create choices that you can potentially go in different directions on a season from now. And so, did that
mm.
create a difference for something like Devil in Ohio in having more of a finite idea of where this journey might go for your character at the beginning?
Yeah, I think, I think I was able to kind of coordinate that with Daria, and kind of craft where the story was going, in a different way. One of the most frustrating things as an actor is when you get a couple episodes into a season or a series, a character, and then all of a sudden there's a line that says like, "I'm from Boston," and then you're like, "I'm from Boston? The hell? I probably would have prepared a Boston accent, a little bit. It's, so, so knowing that Devlin, Ohio took place in Ohio. I grew up in Northwest Ohio, and so I knew, I knew well. I've lived that life, and so it was much easier to jump into rather than, trying to, figure the character out as you go. Yeah, and also with a limited series like that, you got to, like I said with, about Emily and I, you got to get it right from the jump. You don't have episodes to kind of warm into the characters and the family. You just got to be a family immediately, and that's one of the challenges and one of the strengths of these limited series is that as an actor, it's fun to come in and say, okay, how do we get going? How are we, just landing and finding this family and believing that they're a family immediately. That's a fun challenge.
And with that essence of family as well, the space that takes him to at the end of the series is that the journey that they've gone in has brought certain things to the surface for them, and created certain, fractions in their relationship that did exist before, but have just come to a head because of everything that they've been experiencing. And so at the end, we see them in this space of not together, but not being ready to walk away from each other, not giving up on each other, because there is still so much love there, and that they feel like there is a way to work their way back to each other. And so when you know that's in essence where you're carrying a relationship too, but that you need to be able to bring certain things out along the way that are going to create that conflict to bring it to that space. How did you and Emily approach finding what that would be, scene by scene, episode by episode, so that you could carry them to that space in the final episode?
Yeah, I think it's mapped out because we knew it was 8 episodes, and some of the struggle for me in that series was I I there were some notes about the characters wanting to for the for us to really root for these two as a couple. That was kind of like a note from the top, like we want to believe that, that we want to like this couple and root for them. And I thought, well, that's interesting, but I don't give a shit about that. I can't play that. What I care about is whether they're believable, and if they're believable, then we're going to see him struggle with, you know, failing in his business, and how, just the struggles you have in a relationship where you're balancing all these other personalities, and what space and time do you have for each other, and that's interesting to me. And I'm always pushed back on notes that feel like a third person. I don't, I can't play likable. It feels like beige. It's neither here nor there. So trying to get specific about that in the story is I think, hopefully what I try to bring to every project I come into.
That's really great. I also wanted to ask you about the use of music in character preparation, because I've heard you mention
Mm,
that even when you're auditioning for roles, that's already something where you start building together and putting together a playlist. And
yeah,
particularly for roles on two shows like this, I was interested in how even beyond the audition stage, that becomes part of your process in really finding character, or kind of getting into a headspace that you need to for particular tones, because you must have amassed quite the repertoire of playlists at this point in your career.
yeah, yeah. It's true. Yeah, it's kind of cool. My one of my good friends is actor Jonathan Majors, and he and I talk about when he goes into work. There's kind of a series of songs that he plays that kind of get him into space. And for me, it's usually relationships. There's songs that you find that really encapsulate this character's tension and yearning with that character. And trying to find that is always fun. Music's always been a huge part of my life, and my grandmother was a classical pianist, and my father played the flute. My aunt and uncle played the oboe and the French horn, and now to see my 8-year-old just so fascinated with playing the piano, it's like, wow, I carry that into the work that I do, and it's I think it's just it's an easy way to drop in. It's there's smells and sounds and sights that create such nostalgia instantly. Like this time of year, you smell cloves, or in a kitchen, and you're like, oh, it's Christmas time, or it's Thanksgiving. We walk into a room, and I think music is that for me. Like, how to get into this character every day? I got to remind myself where I was in the scenes we shot before, and where it's not theater. You have to jump into a scene that a month after you shot the scene right before it, and to try to one thing you can do is bring music along to say, oh yeah, I know where we were. This is where he is right now emotionally, and this is where we're going.
That's so wonderful. Well, it's so great to see you in both of these projects, because I think as a performer, they really show a lot of the breadth and different spaces that you often play to in different roles. So thank you so much for your time today and talking about both of these. Appreciate it.